Hello and welcome to Off-Chain Live. Today I have a very special guest, Paul Sztorc, and we're going to talk about drive chains. Paul, you want to say hi?
Hello, everyone.
Yeah. This is something that I don't know how familiar my viewers might be with drive chains. So let's just start right off with that. What is drive chains exactly, and what is it going to solve?
Yeah, it's kind of like it's like that book, also Sprach Zarathustra, which is like it's like a book for everyone and no one or something, where it's kind of like sidechains are kind of a big idea. So there are a lot of ways of explaining what they are and sort of what they do. Like sometimes I give an analogy of like a stop sign. Like you could describe what a stop sign is, that it has 8 sides and that it's red, but that's not really like the same thing as describing what it does. But the side chains I would describe in the broadest strokes as just kind of trying to uh, improve something about blockchains. So with a blockchain, everyone needs to have perfect consensus down to the last byte. And as a result, everyone is kind of marching forward. And since everyone has to be together, the whole group can only go as slow as the slowest person. And since everyone has already agreed on where they're marching and how quickly they're marching, it's very difficult to make any changes. So you have this contradiction where, on one hand, software has this kind of permissionless innovation, break everything, move fast to break things like Silicon Valley, creative destruction. You have all this feel for this kind of this way of life almost on GitHub, where you fork a project and you try to improve it, and you have all these competing versions of Linux and all these other things. But on the other hand, the blockchain just rigidly enforces total conformity. So what sidechains are is basically they let you have all these different pieces of software that are totally different. And they're totally autonomous, but they can share. You can try to pick a few features that they share, and the trick is to, of course, have them share the same 21 million coin limit and have only valid transactions going in and out. So and another way of expressing that, maybe shorter, is to just say that it lets Bitcoin pretend to be Ethereum for, the individual Bitcoins themselves. They can go over to a different place and pretend to be Ethereum for a while, and then they can stop pretending to be Ethereum, and they can come back.
So that's sort of the key, isn't it? It's that you have the 21 million Bitcoin limit, and that limit is still preserved in the side chains. Can you talk about that a little more? How do you make sure that no new coins are created or sort of messed with?
Yeah. So what you want, it's a sidechain is very similar to an altcoin. So they're almost exactly the same. Except for that one fact that they share the same amount of coins. And it's actually quite manageable for most of the project to achieve that, because all you do is edit the altcoin so that it doesn't create any coins by itself. So it starts with 0 coins and it doesn't create any coins. And then you make it so that only when someone does something with their Bitcoin wallet, sending the coins into the sidechain, does it credit people on the sidechain with new coins, and then you just wait for someone to destroy the coins on the altcoin, and then you have to unlock those coins on Bitcoin. So maybe that wasn't a great explanation, but the essence is that I think one easy way of thinking about sidechains is that they're very, very similar to altcoins, but they have this extra accounting built in, and a lot of that accounting is very easy. So the starting with 0 and ending with 0 is very easy. Crediting the user with coins only when when they do something special with their Bitcoin. User does something with their Bitcoin and then they show it to the sidechain. The sidechain gives them credit for that, for depositing those coins into the sidechain. So that part, most of it's very easy. There's only one part that's really difficult, which is what do you do when you have the sidechain coins? There's basically this other piece of software. That software has to do something to effectively destroy those coins. When you click withdraw on the sidechain, it's going to produce something that somehow has to unlock the coins on the Bitcoin network. That is the difficult part, but everything else is quite easy.
Right, right. So transferring coins from Bitcoin to the sidechain isn't very hard. Sort of managing it within the sidechain isn't very hard, and managing it within Bitcoin is already sort of done for you with transactions. But getting it from the sidechain coin chain, that seems to be the hard part that pretty much every sidechain implementation has sort of struggled with. And what's
Yes.
DriveChain's approach?
Well,
What are you doing?
I think we could talk about that, but first, I'm happy to talk about that. But let's just,
Mhm.
I think, give people a little bit of a taste of like what. So there is of what is possible if someone succeeds in
Mhm.
doing this, as I suggest. Maybe I have the best idea that is possible. Maybe it's not good enough. Maybe there might be some fundamental limitation or something that stops this idea from working and stops all related ideas from working. But the benefit is that Bitcoin has this ability to reclaim the permissionless innovation concept, where you can just have two or three people and they can try any idea that they want. It can be larger blocks. It can be ring signatures. It can be like Monero. It can be like Zcash. It can be like a Namecoin. It can be BitMessage. Doesn't technically require, but you could have something like that where. So anyone, or it could be any new idea that no one has thought of yet. So you can do any kind of weird thing. The Rootstock guys are doing Ethereum. So I think what I really argue a lot in DriveChain is that it's worth trying because the benefits are so large. It really solves basically every problem because, well, we can get into that, but it does mostly solve the problem of people who are angry at each other and spending a lot of time fighting because now they're all free to do their own thing. And the key issue is that these are all separate pieces of software and they are separate computer networks. So they are as autonomous as altcoins, and people are free to do whatever they want with them. So that's like kind of the pitch. That's like kind of the hook that
Yeah,
everyone
yeah.
should be
For me,
excited
that
about.
that was the most interesting thing about the whole drive chains concept, or side chains in general, is that you could put whatever feature you want on the side chain as long as you can sort of get it back and forth between the main chain and the side chain. And you can almost all the innovations in every altcoin you could probably do on a side chain, and all the future sort of are thinking about, like Mimblewimble, for example,
Yes,
or like
exactly.
Zcash or whatever. Any of those things can essentially be sort of branches off of Bitcoin, and you can sort of bring all those technologies to Bitcoin and just make it work. And that to me was the really exciting part. And I remember during the scaling debate, one of the things that you proposed was, hey, why don't we just have one side chain for SegWit, one side chain for big blocks, and then we'd be done with the debate. That was a
Yes.
really great idea, and I was very unfortunate that that didn't get more traction.
Yeah.
Why do you think that didn't like sort of go forward? Because that seems like
Yeah.
such a great way to like resolve this.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's like for those of people who aren't familiar, I mean, SegWit is great. The idea of SegWit is great, and the implementation is like a tour de force of just like very careful computer science. But it did change just about everything about Bitcoin. It changes so many things. I was describing to a friend, I was like, it's like someone has a disease or something, and instead of giving them better nutrition or giving them like a shot or something, you change their genetic code around so that they become Siamese twins, and then there's like two of them. They have like the same head, but they have two different bodies, and then the second body is like has a different thing, and then you have all this stuff so that they can share blood and everything. And I was like, yeah, it's really messed up. So, but yeah, it's like a weekend project to just do segregated witness if you don't need it to be a soft fork, which all the sidechains are basically hard forks because they're pseudo hard forks. It's a soft fork literally in Bitcoin, but you have the flexibility to do whatever you like on the sidechain, including just screw it, blow it up completely. So it so there you just change the signature, the thing that generates the transaction ID so that it doesn't cover any malleable fields, and you've finished. But it's interesting because people want a special version of Lightning, so you'd probably still have to do that on the main chain. And so that would still be, you'd still have to go through that giant slog. But yeah, I don't know. The idea of why didn't that idea, the idea of just the scaling sidechain get more traction is a very interesting question. It's hard to answer because I think it was the best idea, and I think it was maybe just. It was almost just too good, I think. It sounds crazy to say, but I think you know how it was at the time. I don't know if you were in Milan, but there was like I don't remember if you were. I don't think you were, but
I weren't. I
yeah.
wasn't in Milan.
But like there was a lot of tension. There's a lot of unhappiness. People were walking out the first day. There was these kind of like I just think people kind of had themselves in their little camps. And the other thing is, it wasn't really. It was just kind of an idea. No one really likes the ideas guy, right? Even though they kind of should in blockchain in generally, in Bitcoin, they should like the ideas guy because you have to. Normally, the ideas guy has no value add, but in this case, you have something where the software has to be right for like 100 years, and or whatever, and it's going to be correct for a long, long time. And you don't really get the stakes are kind of high for screwing it up. So you really should, the ideas guy should get more respect. But I guess I was only merely the ideas guy in there was.
Well, I mean, you also made an implementation, though.
Yeah,
it was mostly ready.
Well, you know how software is. It's like you're mostly ready, but not quite. It's like you get to like 90%, and then the last 10% is 500 years or something. So, so that was kind of tough. But yeah, I don't know.
I mean, do you think the time to market was like a major factor? Because there was this sort of almost an artificial sense of urgency around the scaling debate that we're like, well, we need to get it done now, and we can't wait for better solutions. And I don't know. It seemed like people that looked at drive chains thought that it was a superior technical solution. It's just that they thought it would take too long.
I mean, I'll settle for like worth trying because that's kind of a difference in my point of view. Is like like kind of like a cost benefit. Like, is this worth? I mean, I guess Milan people were really focused. SegWit still wasn't finished because remember there was the hackathon right afterwards to kind of ship it, and then that would immediately transition to the drama over SegWit activation because people left Milan to go run Bitcoin Unlimited and block SegWit activation. So that was the start of that whole slog. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's a really good question. People were excited about SegWit and they were then excited about Schnorr. And I think people I'm going to suggest that there's a bias towards these things that are kind of more cryptography based and kind of equation based. And people just like, that's very safe. And it kind of was becoming a design by committee at that point, and people like sort of safe things. And this is much more of like a kind of a crazy chance. Like if we did create a large block sidechain, there would be new aspects to the Bitcoin experiment if you were on it. So you would have to start telling people again. You have to start telling them, well, this is an experimental piece of technology. We don't know what could happen. There could be a bug. There could be a whatever. And so that was an idea. I mean, I was also getting feedback at Milan, and people were saying that I should address this super obscure minor centralization vague point that, so I was interested in doing that, and I did work on that as part of the peer review process. I kind of regret that though, because I think it delayed, I think it wasn't worth the delay, because just think of all the damage that has been done in the last couple of months. And now we have a terrible situation where we have the Bitcoin Cash spinoff, and so now we have people who are actually selling one coin and going to the other, and now those people, the camps are getting even further and further entrenched, which kind of makes I guess it's like running third party, right? Like you have the best ideas, but you have people don't want the best ideas; they want their party to win. And I think that unfortunately some of that has seeped in, and I think it's clear to anyone who pays attention on the major media sites that there's a very strong interest in just publishing anything that bashes the other side versus stuff that has, I mean, is there any actual content, even on our Bitcoin, like our BTC has always been like notoriously like, just like kind of like a cringe fest of just crazy people. But even now our Bitcoin, there's rarely any actual content other than the price memes, which are like their own form of junk food or something. You know, they're like not so.
It's got links
I
to
don't know.
tweets. Yeah.
I think another thing is possible that it kind of the existence of a non-Blockstream sidechain thing might have made people feel awkward, even though Adam Back was always very supportive of it. So I kind of don't think that that's the explanation, but I suppose it's possible.
Between Adam Back and Luke Dash Jr., I mean, you got
right. Yeah, we had Luke Dash Jr.
associated with Blockstream,
and we had the Luke Jr.'s post was stickied by Thamos on our Bitcoin for like 2 weeks or something. And so I think there is actually a lot of support. People, a part of it is, I think maybe just that the idea was still being, I was still finishing it. And you know how it is, like you making these changes and it's all in flux. And then if you're not the guy who's on top of that, like basically if you're not me or Cryptax, Patrick, then you wouldn't like even know like what you were actually talking about, like what you were even endorsing. Because, it's kind of like wet concrete, which is, that's kind of a shame. But it wouldn't have been, the concrete would have dried faster if more people had helped. And it's still not, it's still not totally finished. And your one approach to that is to say, well, I'll come back when it's finished. But another approach is to just jump in and finish it. Like you can help finish it. So that's kind of.
Are you looking for developers still to help you finish this?
I think it's great if anyone can just read the BIP documents, which you were kind enough to point out, like last week or whatever it was, or no, not last week, on Sunday. I'm losing track of time. Sorry, one day is in Bitcoin. One day is like a week, right? It's just
absolutely.
That's just how.
It's absolutely fascinating to me, and like you've gotten a little bit of feedback so far. I guess we can get into a little bit of the technical a little bit.
Sure.
So do you want to just sort of briefly describe the hardest part, which is sort of bringing back Bitcoins from the side chain back to the main chain?
Okay, that is really important. So that is why I specifically renamed the first BIP and I called it Hashrate Escrows, because I didn't want there to be any confusion or I wanted to be totally transparent about what this is, which is that you're locking the money to an SPV proof when you use sidechains. And that has always been the sidechain story. And that must be the sidechain story. So let me just unpack that for a little bit. So what I mean by the SPV proof is that you're only checking to see if it's part of the heaviest chain. You don't check to see if it's part of the heaviest valid chain. You have no idea what is in the chain, and let alone whether or not 100% of the chain's contents are valid, which is what the definition is for the heaviest valid chain. So SPV mode just checks to see that there's been a lot of work done. So you are on maybe the heaviest, you never, of course, epistemically, you never know if you're actually on the heaviest chain or not, but we have strong guarantees that you are and stuff like that. Like the size of the planet Earth is only so large, and you can only suppress the information for so long, and 10-minute block intervals and other things. So, so there is no way either. What you want to avoid is that you don't want to burden Bitcoin Core with all this other junk. So you don't want it to regress and become an extension block. So maybe this conversation will get a little confusing, but the point is you actually want to send the transactions in a place where you can ignore what's going on there, because that is the entire point. And I think this is often misunderstood. So I'm glad that you're asking about it, because the whole point is that you kind of, in quotes, reduce the security, because that is the entire point. You don't want to, it's all about what you gain in return. You don't have to look into all of that stuff and check all of it.
Within the sidechain you're talking about. You don't have to check anything within the sidechain. You just sort of...
We want to make like two people happy. We want to make like Luke Jr. happy, and we want to make like Roger Ver happy. So maybe that can help figure it out. Because think about what is Luke Jr. wants nice and small blocks that are easy to validate, right? He doesn't want to do a lot of work. Not proof of work, but he doesn't want to do a lot of check sig operations and bandwidth, transmission of the transaction data and everything like that. So the sidechain has to be kind of optional, or it has to be a kind of giant anyone can pay situation where there's a lot of degrees of freedom. This money could go to A, could go to B, could go to C. You don't know, and you don't care if you're the Luke Jr. type. So if you're the conservative type, you don't care. You just want your little thing locked down, and you don't want a lot of, You don't want to. You don't want. So that's the point. Is that you're just kind of you're not going to have the node check all that stuff. So as a result, the only thing you have, the only weapon you have, is SPV level security, which is pretty strong security. But we're going to push the boundaries. So it is experimental, and the idea could not work. But the point is that this SPV level security is checking the heaviest chain. It's not checking the heaviest valid chain because it has no idea what's in the chain by definition. So what you are trying to accomplish is merely that. So this reduction in knowledge is intentional. So that's what I'm trying to say. Is what you are doing is putting this money such that the miner can send it anywhere, and that's why I named it Hashrate Escrow. So that's what I was getting at with that.
I see. So the miner puts it somewhere that they just don't really care what happens during the time that it's escrowed, but when it comes back, how does it come back?
Yes. So this is the challenge. So since you're doomed, you have like a big challenge, because now the miners can send the money anywhere. So someone's going to ask, well, why wouldn't the miners just send the money immediately to like Jihan's personal bank account, right? Like that's where you would presume it would be sent in a sort of naive sense. And so what you have to do is you want to really make what you want to do is, okay, so I'll just explain literally what happens in Drive Chain without talking about like kind of there's a giant like philosophy behind this. But in practice, what I do is I have all the transactions wait. So the transactions are very slow. They come back and they all get batched up. It's kind of like an airplane. So if each network was an island, and you're on the sidechain island, and you're on like Rootstock Island or something, and you want to send you got Bitcoin there, and you want them to go back to being Bitcoin Core Bitcoin, then you tell them that they want to leave, and they sort of show up at the airport, at Rootstock Airport, and then they all wait in a big group, and then an airplane comes and picks them up and very slowly taxis them back over to Bitcoin Core Island. And so the point is they come back very slow. Excuse me, they come back very slow, and we announce in advance exactly where the money is going. So it's very easy to check. The sidechain software will sort of report exactly what should be, what the transaction going back should look like, and
there's a commitment that the miners sort of use.
Yes, there's like the hash commitment to the transaction on the sidechain. So it's very easy for human beings to check and see what that is. And then there's the hash commitment is introduced on the main chain on Bitcoin Core. And so then there's a long waiting period, which I would imagine is going to be a minimum of 2 weeks. And then there's a very long period where we acknowledge, do they match or do they not match? And there's like a little upvote, downvote count, and once per block, they increment this count up or down. And if the count reaches a certain threshold, then that transaction is considered valid, and otherwise it's not considered valid.
So it's a minor vote, is what you're saying, to come back.
Well, see, that's what I'm saying. Is the SPV proof is also a minor vote. So this is just kind of acknowledging that. So a lot of people feel very uncomfortable with this, but I think they really should not, because there's a long precedent of related events happening that were fixed much. So we had there was one instance where we accidentally printed like 92 billion Bitcoins or something.
A negative overflow or something like that.
Yes, exactly. There was an overflow, and that was fixed within like 5 hours. And then there was the March 2013 event that was, it was like, these are total emergencies that were unexpected, and they were easily fixed. That was fixed in like 20 blocks or something, like 2 hours or something like that. And so we have a lot of precedent for when something's obviously wrong, it gets fixed. And Drive Chain does not like, and there's a small sense in which that Drive Chain fundamentally relies on something like that, or something like the user activated soft fork, where there's some push will come to shove, and they will, if the miners really want, they will like fork the chain by doing a fraudulent withdrawal, and then they'll fight it out. There'll be two chains, and they'll fight it out in the marketplace or something like that. So that's kind of the seed, or like the foundation. But in reality, I think it would never get. It's sort of like a Supreme Court. That the user activated soft fork idea, or the fixing of the bug idea, the March 2013. That's kind of like the Supreme Court. That's like if there's this big dispute that's ongoing for the whole month, multiple like months, and then it reaches this this place, then that will get the final say. But in practice, most people follow the law or comply with the laws without needing to arbitrate every single. People have all these employment contracts.
People settle their differences before it gets to court. Yeah.
So that's another thing, is that there are these atomic. No one actually has to use any of the mechanisms for shepherding the coins in between chains, because they have atomic swaps, which are basically like a kind of shapeshift type thing, which work instantaneously. So
you would need lightning on both.
Yeah, the speed is not. Yeah, well, the atomic swaps are even different than lightning. So you can do the atomic swaps, and you can do You can do lightning through the side chain, or you can do an atomic swap transaction.
Just on-chain atomic swap.
Yes, you can do an on-chain atomic swap. Yes. So without, in that sense, you would trade your rootstock Bitcoin to someone else. If you and I would be on. You would exist on the rootstock island and the Bitcoin Core island, and I would as well. And so I would give you I'd give you, say, 1 Bitcoin on rootstock island, and then you would give me 0.99 Bitcoin on Bitcoin Core island. We'd do that at the same time, and that does not require any weird drive chain stuff like that. So what I'm trying to say is, although the problem is big, and although it's solved in kind of a crazy way, it's what I've done is I've kind of like lined all these things up so that it's actually really, really difficult in practice to imagine it going wrong, but it's not possible. It's not impossible, and so people should be aware of the risks. But as I was saying before, they should also be aware of the benefits, because the benefits are very extreme. So here's the thing: is if push comes to shove, so like let me explain one more thing: is that the rules for drive chain carefully limit, like, it's supposed to be very light on attention, how much attention the user is required. So that's part of this 2-week waiting period, where the software, everyone running a sidechain node will know the instant that they don't match. So you'll know immediately. But I say there's a 2-week, for whether it's valid or invalid or whatever it is, there's a 2-week waiting period. So all this stuff that I was just described was fixed as in a sort of an emergency thing by volunteers within like a few hours. But this is something where, so this, we don't want to tax that, because we don't want to just try to exploit that and drive that resource to its limit. That's very unfair. But I've thrown all these kind of like these hurdles in for the attacker, where they've got to wait like 2 weeks where it's just like X is saying equaling Y, but they just aren't equal, and there's just nothing they can do about how wrong it looks. And then you have this long period where miners can either upvote or downvote. So at a certain point, you'd say, why are miners upvoting? Because it's wrong. But then after another couple of days, and we know how long a day is in Bitcoin, it's a week of pre-Bitcoin lifetime. You wonder, like, why aren't other miners just downvoting? Because it's very easy for miners to just sort of downvote everything and say, I don't know what's going on, but let's delay this until we figure it out. So they can easily delay, and the delay is always advantageous to the honest party, because it gives everyone more time to figure out.
Yeah. I think essentially what you're doing is you've aligned all of the incentives so that there's social pressure put on the bad actors in this sort of scenario.
Yeah, you're right. That is, and I think that is very important, that there's kind of a sort of a stigma or a shame of just like the miners is doing something that's so obviously wrong. But it's financial pressure as well as social, because if push comes to shove, and they actually do a fraudulent withdrawal, and the sidechain is sort of like a healthy sidechain that people like, and so if we have the actual bad event happen where people were actually using the sidechain, they put a bunch of significant amount of money over there, miners withdrew the money themselves. One thing is that it's just as easy for miners to steal all of the money as it is for them to steal any amount of money. So that kind of makes the very act itself less forgivable and more threatening and more kind of crazy. So that's intentional as well. But the financial pressure is that the market price of Bitcoin would I think have to fall, because what it would mean is the end of not only that sidechain and not only all the fees on that sidechain, but I think it means the end of the sidechain experiment, because it means that this model doesn't really work. And so what it means is that, but I think if this model doesn't work, I think really no model can work, because as I tried to explain, you are kind of trapped, because it's intentionally you are not allowed to have Bitcoin Core check the sidechain's rules, which is the design challenge. So if that doesn't, so if they steal once, it kind of breaks the whole thing, which means all the sidechains features, which users might like, and all future sidechains, which might have great features that might be invented in the future, that might not, all of that is destroyed, and all the transaction fee revenue on all those chains is destroyed. And I think that is, I think that would merit not a great response, especially given the fact that if push came to shove, user-activated soft fork to block the fraudulent transfer, at which point they would basically split the network in two, one where everything was honest and one where something was dishonest. So I think that would be just, I mean, how can an honest business person lose a fight against the dishonest? I think they have to win.
I think we already know that the Bitcoin security model requires 51% of the miners, to be honest. I think you're just sort of extending that and sort of, sort of taking that to a further limit than maybe it currently is in Bitcoin.
Exactly. That is exactly what I'm doing. It is riskier, and people should be aware of that. But I'm drawing on these experiences that we have had times where, we have the value overflow incident, and it was, it's not as though, it's not really the case that people just roll over and just let the miners just take the money out of the chain. And the mere threat that users might do something about it is really enough, to say, in the Supreme Court type model.
Yeah, so and this is why, like, selfish mining and a lot of other theoretical attacks have never been on the network, is because users would get really angry, and they would it would just take some action.
All it would do, selfish mining has a very interesting property where it if it really is better, then every miner has an incentive to do it, and if every miner has an incentive to do it, stuff just breaks horribly. What you would have is, you'd have like no one officially finding a block, right? Because no one announces selfish mining. So no one announces. So there would never be a block announced, and then some naive idiot, like 4 hours later, would announce a block, and then all of a sudden there'd be like, 8 different, like 40 block chains that would all be announced or something like that. And then as you can see, but if everyone does selfish mining, there's no gain, because it's a relative. It's a relative advantage.
I mean, it's mutually assured destruction.
So the miner strategies all cancel each other out constantly. I mean, it's very difficult, because if everyone does them, they just cancel out. So as you say, as I'm saying, there's no benefit. But as you say, the cost is that it just screws up the network. And so that's a big reason why it just takes effort to put that thing in, and it just wrecks everything. So it's not surprising that we see this. But you understand, I think you get it perfectly, which is that I am kind of like, I'm kind of taking that as an established scientific fact, about an empirical fact, whereas before it was just kind of like, oh, isn't that neat?
Maybe this will work, maybe not. But I think it's been proven over the last 8 years. All right, so let's move on to the actual mechanisms. So we talked a little bit about Hashrate Escrow, and I think we've more or less described it. The funds go into sort of like a miner escrow, and they can come back, and the miners sort of have to vote on it. But that mechanism doesn't necessarily have to get used very much. It's kind of like an ETF, where you have a basket of currencies or something like that. There are people that will arbitrage and sort of keep the price very similar, but that's not the main way in which people get in and out of it. You said something about atomic swaps and maybe Lightning even. Exactly. What's this other one? This blind merge mining. That's the bit that I'm still trying to wrap my head around. Can you describe it for our viewers?
Okay, so I think it's easier if like Hashrate Escrow is basically say it's an account where you put these timing parameters in, and as long as users can very easily, check these hashes as we just described, miners can send the money anywhere, and that introduces the infinite flexibility required for sidechains. And so then what you want is, see, it's an interesting timing thing too as well. These are very simple principles that are not kind of cryptographic at all, but it's kind of like, you create a weird sidechain, a weird Hashrate Escrow, and then after you create it, you have to convince people to use it. So it sounds kind of crazy to say, oh, are people really going to put their money in an account that says the miners can send it anywhere? And my answer to that is, they probably won't unless you got to convince people that, okay, here's my Monero sidechain, and it will be very easy for you to check what's going on here, and that is part of the thing. So it's kind of neat because that part. But what I'm saying with Hashrate escrows, you have a lot of flexibility, so you can do whatever weird Ripple stuff, even R3 Corda. You can do literally anything there. You can do proof of stake. You could do proof of space and time, which is Bram Cohen's. You can do whatever weird thing, right? Because as you understand, I'm just putting money in a box and then opening the box and sending it somewhere else. So that is lots and lots of flexibility. But the other thing is that what we really want is we want something like Namecoin, which has merge mining. And so what I did is I kind of optimized the merge mining idea to work with Drive Chain the best. And in so doing, I solved two kind of remaining quirky problems with original merge mining. First is that with merge mining, merge mining is very difficult, I think, to explain. I think lots of really smart people have no idea how it works. And so I have
Don't you put a hash commitment into the Coinbase before you mine the Bitcoin block or something like that?
Yes. So it is. The weird thing is you set up your software so that it hashes I'm going to screw up the explanation because I'm dooming everyone. But basically what you do is you set it up so that what you're actually doing is mining a Namecoin block. And then the Namecoin block looks really weird. But when you find you're trying to mine a Namecoin block, and you're succeeding because Namecoin's difficulty is lower. But sometimes you succeed and you actually mine something that it hits Namecoin's difficulty target as well as Bitcoin's. So what you've done is you've set up something that's a Namecoin block, but inside of the Namecoin block is a Bitcoin block. So you ended up mining both at the same time. So it's very kind of weird. But the point is just that what you have is a second network. And what that network does is it says that it can say, it can download. So Bitcoin, in the blockchains, they have these headers, and there's all the block data that has everything important that's happening. But then there's all these headers, and that's how we check to make sure that enough work has been done. You only need to check the headers, and they're only like 4 megabytes a year. And that is the magic of SPV for people who are into that, which is increasingly fewer and fewer people. But that's not really relevant to what I'm saying. All I'm saying is, Bitcoin is very clever about the way it works, where it just checks a small amount of data for the work, puts all the work on this easy to check part, and then we have all these big blocks that have all the 1 megabyte blocks. And so what merge mining does is it lets you kind of draw a weird line that is like sometimes Namecoin only headers and sometimes weird Bitcoin headers it kind of lets you do like a weird tangle. So maybe I should just give up on explaining it because it is notorious. And basically what it lets the miners do is mine 2 different networks at once at no cost to them. And so for a long time, Namecoin had a large percentage, I don't know, 80%, and at one point it fell to like 55 for multiple years. 55% of Bitcoin's hash rate, and something funny, very funny happened recently that I will talk about right after this, but it had 55% of Bitcoin's hash rate, despite the fact that there was something like, I think it was 4 orders of magnitude difference in the reward. So if you mined Bitcoin only, you got like $30,000 per block or something. And if you mined Namecoin, you got like $5 per block. And they were both 10 minutes each. And so 55% of the hash rate was going for both. It said, I want the 30,000 plus 5, even though it's a tiny, tiny, tiny little thing, which is very funny. The real question, though, is why isn't it 100%? Because it's a free $5. And the answer is that, first of all, you get paid in Namecoin dollars. You don't get paid in Bitcoin, so you got to exchange it, so it's slightly inconvenient. But the other problem is that you had to run the Namecoin full node because you had to assemble the block so that you would know that you would assemble the next valid block. And so you had to know what block you were making. And the Namecoin software was just, no offense to anyone, and everyone is doing a great job, but it just wasn't as maintained as much as Bitcoin Core, so it would crash. And then when it crashed, the entire mining operation went down. So it actually wasn't free. The mining operation would go down, when Namecoin crashed, so some people weren't up for that, but other people had clever things where they could make it so that if it crashed, it wouldn't like,
destroy
you know what I
everything.
mean? Like they had different instances or something, so they had a way of like clicking it over to something else. But so what blind merge mining does is it says that actually nodes, sidechain nodes, will assemble the block and pay themselves the sidechain fees. And then what they will do is if they happen to be someone, and I imagine this would be everyone, but if they happen to be someone who runs the sidechain node and owns funds on the main chain, Bitcoin Core, so they're on whatever island running a node because they want to use that feature. And they also exist on Bitcoin Core because the vision for Drive Chain is a very asymmetric one and a very hierarchical one. So it's that where Core is kind of literally the center, and then a pyramid, and there's side chains, and then maybe there's side chains of side chains possibly. But the vision is really that Core is the center. And so this is a very robust assumption that whoever's running a sidechain node either does have or could easily have, or just that 2 or 3 or 4 people who are running a sidechain node also have money on main chain Bitcoin. And so those people, what they do is they just make a payment to, they say, I'll pay miners XYZ if they find this block. And so they find a block, say it's the sidechain, they find a block paying themselves 17 sidechain Bitcoin or something like that in transaction fees. So the sidechain block is a normal blockchain. There's all these transaction fees up for grabs. The sidechain nodes all assemble the blocks, excuse me, assemble the blocks paying these transaction fees to themselves, which is exactly how mining works right now, with all the miners assembling the blocks and paying the transaction fees to themselves. And so the difference is that the sidechain node obviously can't get the proof of work. So what they do is they just buy it. And so they say, I'm paying myself 17 Bitcoin if I find this block. And so they make on the main chain Bitcoin, they make a little payment that says, okay, I'll give you, Mr. Miner, 16.9 main chain Bitcoin, if and only if the next block that's found merge mines my thing. Merge mines my sidechain block. So
they can sort of arb between the two a little bit and get the difference.
They should try, it should be, as long as there's more than one, it should be very competitive, where they should be kind of, because you can only find one sidechain block per sidechain per main chain block, if that is not too much of a mouthful. But long story short is that the miners have to do even less than they had to do before. So now it's as if in this world
you don't have to convert anything because you get paid directly in Bitcoin coins,
and they don't even need to know anything about what's going on the network.
Yeah, they don't have to really run the sidechain, which is kind of a huge innovation.
Right.
This was always the problem with merge mining, was that you had to give up all this bandwidth to receive all of the transactions from the merge mine chain.
Yes,
which now you don't have to do with blind merge mining.
Yes, there was a fear that someone would create. I keep finding funnier and funnier names for it. So now I'm calling it like the ESPN 4K chain or something like that. There was this risk that someone would. I'm trying to think of like a funny thing, because the threat is someone comes up with a chain that has a lot of revenue, but is like horribly bandwidth intensive, and so it's like leaking the location.
CryptoKitty sidechain.
Yeah, right. That could be like CryptoKitty or Crypto Rabbits or something. They'll run amok and they're everywhere now.
They're breeding really fast. Yeah,
exactly. It's exponential growth. You know how long until the lake is half covered in rabbits? That type of thing.
Yeah, but you've essentially made it so that you can merge mine without necessarily knowing that much about the chain, which is very beneficial to the miner to merge mine, because it's all upside, very little downside as far as they're concerned. Because
and the key thing is that it shouldn't disadvantage any smaller miner or anything like that, because the miner, even if ideally all the miners would be connected to a pool, and the pool would have just 2 or 3 or 4 connections to some sidechain nodes that would do this, and then they get all the revenues, and they don't need to worry about any of this thing. Now that's obviously not free either, but it's I argue that it's actually the exact same security model that we already have, which is something that I just emailed Matt Corallo about earlier today because he had some feedback about that. The issue is that the real issue, as I was talking with him about, is that the sidechain doesn't have its own block subsidy, so it's not printing any money. So it doesn't have the 12.5 new Bitcoins each block. It just has 0 each block.
Right, because otherwise you'd be inflating Bitcoin.
Exactly. So that's a very desirable thing. But again, there's no free lunch in engineering and in economics. So there's what is really kind of one area of uncertainty for sidechains is that they are in the world where we only have the transaction fees, which is Bitcoin's ultimate destination. And now, because the fees are so high, we might actually get there a lot sooner than I thought. Because we're already, I think maybe even you told me that there was one that was like 13.5 in fees and 12.5, which I would never have expected that would happen.
It was during the spammy weekend when everyone was trying to get, it was the Bitcoin Cash pump when.
I know, but that I would never have thought that it would be, because before even the orders of magnitude were. Just so vast. It was such a big difference between 50 Bitcoin and like 0 fee, and then 25 and then like 0.05 total fees. And then we were getting basically only 1 Bitcoin per block fee rate for like most of this year. And for that to go from 1 just straight up another order of magnitude to 13, it was like, that was very surprising to me. So, but then we're already in a case where the fees are more important than, but no one knows for sure what will happen when in Bitcoin or anywhere else. So another kind of fun thing is that you might as well do this sidechains experiment, because we'll get to figure out like what things go wrong, when you have that world. But I don't think the blind merge. Matt was anyone who's interested should read the Bitcoin Dev mailing lists, both in general but also specifically. I have the, you could see today I replied to Matt Corallo, who wrote about this. And he has like a concern, and he frames it very well. But what I try to unpack is that what he's concerned about is actually this world with no block subsidy. He's not, the blind merge mining part isn't, just makes it look different, but that part is not the different part. The different part is that we only have these little things. So if someone wants to do a reorganization, if someone owns 5 Bitcoin on the sidechain and they send it to someone else, and then they wait for 6 sidechain confirmations, and then they want to rewrite it with 7, the opportunity cost of doing that, or kind of the thrust of doing that, will be proportional to what is the sum of the transaction fees over those 7 blocks.
Right.
It'd be basically that figure, more or less. And if that figure is small, then that is kind of concerning. So I'm not sure exactly.
Well, although there is kind of like, we've been talking about the social cost of sort of like doing something sketchy on the network or something seen as an attack.
Yes.
And there's a giant social cost to that, because people stop trusting.
Right. Yeah, I think you're completely right. The problem is that blind merge mining disables a lot of that, because it's blind, so you don't know. But in practice, you can actually switch easily from regular merge mining to blind merge mining. So actually, I would expect, this is kind of, now I'm really kind of just making stuff up right now. It's like getting even worse than it ever was. But what I would expect is that miners would just literally merge mine the chain at first to kind of get it out of the cradle, because they'd say, okay, users might like this feature, so we're going to make sure that it works, because we're the miners and we want the value of Bitcoin to go up. We want this next transaction fee revenue or something like that. And so I think they would be the node that tells themselves what the next block is, and it would be very different. It would be very similar to Namecoin originally, and then as the bandwidth stuff, as the resource costs pick up, they would gradually start outsourcing that. Maybe, who knows? Or it may just be another possibility. And I don't remember. I think I didn't write. I was almost going to write this in the email to Matt, but I didn't. I think another possibility is just that in the world without the block subsidy, that is just a world where people need to wait for more confirmations.
Sure,
and that's
sure.
just
That's a very reasonable position. It might just take longer. Yeah.
Yeah, and which would be not great, but it would. See, the other thing is like it would be not great, but that would, if these are, I think what I'm trying to get at is these mysteries are not really central to side chains. They're actually central to how a blockchain performs when it doesn't have a block subsidy or when the fees are low or something like that. So it's kind of like they're different questions, and we might as well like learn about them. I mean, you might, because think about it, if you need more confirmations, then it kind of re-emphasizes the Lightning Network for everything, because then you just say, okay, super long custodial period with multiple custodians, and then that is, because that's kind of a binary or like heavy side. That's either like good enough or not good enough, true false. And so once you get that secure, you have sidechain secure, you have the Lightning Network secure, then everything's instant and off chain and private. So maybe that's the way to go, or maybe there'll be some problem with that, and we should go somewhere else. It's a complicated.
Well, so you had an interesting sort of thing with the HiveMind / TruthCoin project, which is that you have sort of a native coin within the sidechain that's separate from the Bitcoin. So you could sort of incentivize miners that way.
Well, right, but that's weird because my project is probably the only project that actually, because that exists for a very important reason, to manage a second separate digitally scarce thing that is not money, but it is actually the reputation of the people. I need a way to punish the workers in the system if they don't behave. So it's kind of like a sort of a very, we might in a very abstract way describe as shares of a kind of a, I don't know what to say, an abstract kind of corporation of some kind. So sort of the what was it called, the DAC, right?
But I mean, isn't that concept sort of like extendable? Can't you?
So I can do that.
Allow people to mine like a separate sort of token, and you have a two token chain, basically.
Well, I'm not sure that you could, because why would this second token have any value? Although I'm obviously saying that in this world where we have loony altcoin world, it's like, I feel like. Yeah, so that is kind of like my commitment to science and empiricism is like, laughing at that, even though I like theoretically they should all have no value, right? But like, of course,
it's why monetizing developer time is what it looks like, or future expectation of future development time, or something like that.
I do not know why, but see, mine in TruthCoin or HiveMind, that token does have a value, which is driven by trading fees and other things, and it's inescapably. It is essential to the operation of the.
Yeah, it has monetary value, so you could give it out as sort of a miner.
So that one you could give as a block subsidy, but I don't know how. So because in that one, value is coming from different people who are making trades in the prediction markets in those markets. So there's an engine. There's like a fuel source. So then you could pay out some of that to miners, but I don't know where you'd get this engine in something else. Like where would you get that in? You could try to get it from the other participants, but you see that's not a free lunch either, because so you could say like we will. You could do like a kind of weird demurrage thing or something. You understand, like an inflation tax?
Yeah. I think if you have a separate coin, that argues very strongly for some level of inflating of Bitcoin. So I think there would be a lot of resistance to some concept.
I agree that it's been said by a number of people. I think one of the earliest was Gavin Andreessen, that adding just the mere existence of an altcoin is kind of cheating the 21 million coin limit, because it is like an inflation tax. It is a separate form of money. That is a separate purchasing power. It's a separate claim on all the assets of.
That said, I mean, Bitcoin is Bitcoin. You're not printing any Bitcoin on Litecoin or anything else. All right, so I do want to get to some other stuff. I mean, there's certainly been a lot of talk about Mimblewimble as a side chain, and possibly using drive chains to make that work. What are your thoughts around sort of Mimblewimble, maybe Rootstock, and all of these other projects that are sort of looking for some sort of sidechain tech to make their stuff run?
Well, I think Mimblewimble is so weird that there's no way it has to be a sidechain, a Bitcoin, or just an altcoin. there's no way you can like, so often people are talking about things like you know, like you can there's a lot of stuff can be done with like script versioning, and people are always like, oh, can we fit this weird feature in, you know? People are really excited, like, oh, maybe we can soft fork it into Bitcoin Core, my own pet little idea. But Mimblewimble, I do not see that happening, but you never know, because Andrew Polstra has pulled so many rabbits out of so many hats at this point.
Scriptless scripts, yeah. just crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, but the other thing is it is kind of confusing, because Mimblewimble it's just slight, it's, you know, it's super cool, but it's slightly, the experts have discovered that aspects of it are a little disappointing. So not me, but I'm just repeating what I've been told, which is that the privacy aspect isn't as great, because an adversary will be watching the network,
watching for everything,
and they'll log all this. So the ability to combine them and hide them with each other won't really help, because the ability, what is it called, the non-interactive combining, that doesn't really matter, because the adversary is going to watch everything. So it's going to be as if it were interactive or something for them, because they're just going to watch everything. And then even the shrinking of the blockchain doesn't matter, because in real time, when you're trying to find the next block, so like at the frontier, you have all the same bandwidth problems that you'd have before. So the main benefit is in helping people catch up, and you can show them this thing that lets them instantly.
Well, it's also confidential, right? Like, more or less, it's there's no addresses or amounts, so yeah.
Right, the amounts are. You don't want to, you know, it's not really my area of expertise, but yeah, that's my understanding, is that it's much more private, which is great. But I was just pointing out that this other benefit is also not great, because the sidechain is already SPV level security. So you're already kind of just taking that the last 6 months are not wrong on faith or something. See, Bitcoin Core can do a lot, will do a lot for the sidechain, because it's going to do all the global accounting. So it's going to keep track of the 21 million coin limit, and it's going to, Bitcoin Core, not the sidechain, will know, okay, 17,000 Bitcoin have been sent to the sidechain, and only 3,000 have come back. So Bitcoin Core will know all that, and so that so the sidechain benefits a lot, and so that's kind of part of the reason why.
It also hides some of the privacy, right? You know how much has gone into that sidechain. So
that's right. At the barrier, the transactions going in and going out they will have to be regular Bitcoin transactions.
Yeah.
So they have to be. They cannot. There's a limit where it's impossible to do, because Bitcoin Core has to understand what that is before it can.
Allow that.
So there are some kind of things, but yeah, I think it would be really cool. It would be a great way of trying out Mimblewimble, like with real Bitcoin. I think people would really enjoy it. It may be more private. I think there's definitely something like Monero, where there's some like the chain is much heavier. Or even especially because of the way Monero works in practice, where they hard fork every 6 months or every year or so, and so that's better. That's a better fit for SPV mode, because SPV mode just kind of is saying we won't check literally every detail of everything, but we're kind of trying to just stay in sync in an efficient way, and we're going to cut.
Well, there's a trust of a majority of whoever you're connected to there. That's part of the SPV security, and that
helps because then you're already there with sidechain, so you don't lose anything extra by doing that again. So you could have like. There could be like two different, they could be out of phase, two different, what was I just saying, Monero side chains, and they could be like, one could be every June and one could be every December that they shut it off and then they turn it back on. And then even though they have this endlessly growing UTXO problem, they wouldn't, because they just kill off the chain. And so it'd be
and bring everything back and then go into a new side chain. Okay, that would be great. It would be
like a big, like a big Tumblr or something like that, and that would be kind of.
Well, it's interesting because you have this idea of a side chain reset. You can bring everything back and then reset the chain, so you don't actually have to keep track of everything. And if CryptoKitties is too popular, that's what you do.
Exactly. So again, I try to emphasize that it's a lot easier to understand sidechains if you just imagine them as altcoins. That's so they're just altcoins with Bitcoin's accounting, where the Bitcoin's 21 million coin limit. So you can really just do just any weird, stupid thing you want to do on an altcoin. You can do any weird, crazy thing, right? You know, it doesn't matter. But what does matter is that if you, you know, it does matter is these transactions coming back. And if people don't believe that they will be able to withdraw their money, they will never put it in the first place. And so that itself helps a lot. That's a big part of the model. It's just the timing.
It would be interesting to see sort of like the first sidechain vulnerability where somebody sort of deposits a lot of money into it, and then somebody sort of steals it from them on the sidechain, and then, you know, sort of what happens with, like, you're sort of putting miners in this weird position where they could sort of adjudicate or something like that, kind of like, you know, they get to be Vitalik with the DAO or something.
Yeah, that is unfortunate. So I tried to address that, I think, but ultimately it's not really a bad thing, I think, because the miners are going to want to do whatever is best for the value of Bitcoin. And I think that is enough of a guiding light, really, to just kind of just say, like, whatever, you know, like, I don't really, you know, so but most of the time what's best is that, you know, because what if someone was going to wake them up in the middle of the night and say, oh, it's 3 a.m. we need to roll back the, you know, the Vitalik kitten side chain, because, and then they're just gonna like hang up the phone or whatever, you know, like, but if it's important, then they'll do it. So it's kind of like this is very much of a cheating kind of answer, but it's kind of like, if it's a big problem,
the market will figure it out.
They'll figure it out. And if it's not a big problem, then they won't figure it out. And then it's on the user, which is exactly where it should be. It's on the investor and the user to decide what risks and rewards they want to take with their money, which is exactly where it should be, right? That's much, 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 much better than what we have now, which is kind of like just try to guess which set of things is best for like the plurality of, or, you know, the majority of investors or something, which is what we do now, which is, it's not, you know, it's not bad. There are a lot of things we could have screwed up by now, right? We could have changed the coin limit. We could have done DAO. We could have done like a Mt. Gox rewrite thing. Done all these bad things so it's been going very well, but I just think we can make it even better, because why shouldn't you, if you want large blocks, or if you want proof of space and time, or if you want some other weird thing, why not? Like, you can already get it on an altcoin. So we're just turning down all that value that's going to the altcoins that we could have in Bitcoin, and we're just turning it down really for no reason.
Well, so I mean, that sort of assumes that features are what give the altcoins value, and I'm not certain that is.
No, I completely agree with you that they do not. And so that almost, you asked about Rootstock, and we can almost talk about that. But I think Rootstock is making the same mistake that Counterparty made, or that's what I'm afraid of. You know, and it's not like
what mistake is that? Sorry.
Well, I think it's what you said, that they think that people care about smart contracts, when what they really care about is a party that's not Bitcoin, that they can show up to first, and they won't be late, and that they can meet new friends and have fun on a great adventure.
Well, and they can get the marketing power of Vitalik behind them.
With the wonderkind, boy genius, Jesus Christ Savior figure. What can't you do, right? So. But I think, Counterparty did this. You can go back. I'm trying to remember. Was it like summer of 2013 or 2014 or something?
2014, like that? I think, where Ethereum made Counterparty on theirs, and then Counterparty made Ethereum on theirs, something like that.
Right, exactly. Yeah, but no one cared. No one cared about either. It kind of demonstrates your point perfectly, I think. But in particular, Counterparty said, "Look, we have the Ethereum virtual machine now in Counterparty." Counterparty there was a huge pump that day, went up like 10x. But then it crashed like over the later weeks, and no one cares today because it has nothing to do with it.
It's not about the feature. Yeah, exactly. It's about something else, and maybe it's the network effect. Or
I think it is the network effect. I think it's also, you know, people disagree about this, but I think it's a stealth campaign to dethrone Bitcoin as the internet money.
I mean, speaking as an economist, I know you have like many degrees in that. Is that the main value proposition for Ethereum then? Is sort of like their possibility for taking over Bitcoin?
I definitely think that there's that. Well, it's kind of like Bitcoin, where people are very coy. People are very clever about in Bitcoin, because a lot of people will pretend on Bitcoin to be like a much dumber version of themselves. So with all the memes and with all this stuff, people pretend they figure out what Bitcoin's really about. and then they pretend that they only care about getting rich. They blend in, and they really understand what real cryptography is about, which is like plausible deniability and like all this. So people are very clever about who they, and I think Ethereum people are also very clever about that too. They know what game is being played, and they say out loud, they say, well, they can coexist, and Ethereum is never trying to compete with Bitcoin, and it's digital. This is Gavin. When Gavin Wood said this, I just couldn't believe that this stuck, and everyone was afraid to say that the emperor had no clothes on this one for years and years. Gavin Wood said that Bitcoin is digital gold, and the ether was digital oil.
Yeah, I mean, they've been saying that for years. We are oil to Bitcoin's gold after.
Yeah, I thought that was the dumbest thing. It was so dumb. I mean, it's just transparently false. Like, the function of gold is that if I give you a gold coin, you might give me like a really old car or something. I could buy a suit, a nice tailored suit with a little gold coin. And so the function of digital gold is that you would accept it in return for its stuff. It's money. It's a medium of exchange, and it's a store of value and all these things. And the function of oil is that it moves the car, or it heats my house or something. But ether doesn't do that. Like, so I don't know what it's
maybe it's a lot more voluminous per volume or something like that. I don't know.
But it literally is described as like the cost of various computing resources. So it is also a value. It's also gold. So I don't know what, like. But people said that thing about oil, and everyone was just afraid. They were afraid for so long to say that it didn't make any sense. And then if you said it didn't make sense, people would be like, you don't understand like how.
I mean, they have something called gas, Paul. That
right.
Like, tell you something. Yeah.
It's very obscure. But you asked my opinion. That is what it is. That people think. I think there's a lot of smart people in Ethereum who I don't agree that they're right, but they have these theories that are something like, okay, with Bitcoin, too much of it was mined too quickly, and so all the people who bought into Bitcoin, that's not enough of a network effect to carry it over the line. So now that blockchain technology is big, we're going to have new people, and if we just get it's smart. They're like a second political party or something. They know who they're not going to get. They're not going to get like the hardcore anarchist libertarian even. So they fold that hand because it's a losing hand. And that's why Ethereum has all this weird stuff. Like, it has 2% inflation forever, but declining. So it's kind of like this weird mix of everything. It has, if Bitcoin is conservative, right? It doesn't put in ghost because it makes selfish mining worse. Or Ethereum puts ghost, just put everything in. A ghost, like,
what do you mean by a ghost? Sorry, I didn't.
The uncle thing. The
uncle
something generating heaviest tree or something. I don't remember.
Yeah, so if you, instead of orphan blocks on Ethereum, you get some subsidy if you
they do the uncle thing. They do proof of stake. They do everything. They do everything. Whatever it is, as long as Bitcoin won't do it, they'll do it. Which is, you understand, like, that is smart if you are playing by this other set of rules, that you want to capture a different group of people and hopefully make it bigger. And same thing with the ICOs. They were like, well, this, Bitcoin was like, get that out of here because it's transparently stupid. But Ethereum was like, if you've got money, and you've got marketing, it's a match made in heaven. So I think that is a lot of what that is. And even, honestly, it's kind of clever that I highly doubt that it can even possibly succeed, because the internal logical contradictions of Ethereum are just so numerous, and so there's so many flaws that can't be fixed. But it's a smart long shot, and I understand why it has value, I think, now more than I did in the past. Because think about it, like, if they stumbled upon some kind of like sidechain like thing early on enough, and then they kind of they clamped everything down and said, okay, we're not changing any of this stuff anymore. And if you didn't have the DAO, which is a big if, because I think stuff like that is inevitable, but if you didn't, and they discover some kind of sidechains thing or something that is like a real win, but they never do. They only ever copy Bitcoin stuff. Like, Bitcoin came out with the Lightning Network after years of R&D and like careful thought, and then like 2 weeks later, Ethereum has Raiden or whatever. It's the same thing. You know, that's the Mortal Kombat Lightning character. It's
right?
like, you know, it's like, who are we kidding here? You know, so right afterwards, and then people talk about sharding, but none of it goes anywhere. And then I'm sure now that I'm talking about this, then suddenly Ethereum will have a new, exactly what I'm doing, but with a different.
Well, yeah, I imagine that'll be their scaling solution at some point. We're gonna have side chains, yeah.
So let's talk about that, because that's a cool thing. That's my Milan presentation, which is not only that you have the larger block side chain and let Roger Ver go over there, but also that the whole system is a little bit better, because it is like this. It's just like a strategy. It's this Mott and Bailey strategy. You might be familiar with the Mott and Bailey.
I'm not.
It's a logical fallacy, really, where people sub some things in. It's like a shell game where you attack from a weak position, and then when you're counterattacked, you retreat to a strong position. And so it's completely illogical and very unfair and invalid and wrong, because you have to just pick what your position is. You can't keep changing it, right? But the defense is that you have this this duality where you can switch when you're being attacked versus when you are attacking. So the point is, everyone can hang out in the nice part, which I believe is the Bailey. Yeah, the Bailey is the nice part where you want to attack from. So you have the large block side chain, you hang out there. But then when the bad guys show up and attack the network, then you just kind of put the large blockchain on pause. And you can even keep it on pause forever, and potentially even just close it down and slowly walk everyone's money back from the large blockchain to the small blockchain. And so you can kind of hang out in the large blockchain, but then retreat to the small blockchain like at a moment's notice. And because you can do that, this is the real magic, is that because you can do that, the adversary is less likely to even attack the large blockchain in the first place. So it's like you have this big castle. Castle is the Mott. In fact, I'm pretty sure in Game of Thrones, Deepwood Mott is named after that idea, which is why I think the names are like that. But the point is, you have this big stone tower thing. You retreat to that in times of crisis. But since you got one there, no one bothers attacking you in the first place. So you're hanging out in the plain, the nice meadow the whole time, because they know that you're just going to, as soon as you go over there, you're just going to go back into the...
it's taking advantage of one part of... I think...
You can imagine, imagine in your mind, like, two newspaper headlines, right? One of them is like, U.S. government closes down Bitcoin, and then the subtitle is like, ha ha ha, you stupid large blockers, you know, you ruined everything, and now there are no nodes, and it's all been ruined, or whatever. Or that they put DMCA take down on all the nodes, or something weird like that. You know what I mean? Something weird happens to the large, something that's not defined happens to the large, and the large large block network. But then a different newspaper headline would be something like, some Bitcoin transactions will now be more expensive and slower as a result of, you know, the U.S. government or something. Just one is like the U.S. government has a victory, right, over Bitcoin. But the other one is just that the U.S. government is just kind of being annoying to people who are using the large blockchain.
Because they can always just go over somewhere else. Yeah.
And the people on the large blockchain are probably your price sensitive. Like the vision that I have is that that's all the price sensitive people over there. So they are like all the honest KYC AML people. So they're just be shooting their own, like the good the kind of well behaved
people.
The total limit
that's not unusual for the U.S. government. So yeah.
But I'm saying, and I'm not saying it's impossible, but I am saying it's like as when you're looking at the kind of menu of options that you have, if you're the attacker, you want to pick something that will work. You don't want to pick something that won't work. So if that's something that's not actually going to work, then you won't try that. You'll try something else.
Okay. All right. So I did have another thing to ask you about. I think Monero was talking about doing Mimblewimble on a sidechain of their own. How can you imagine a sort of sidechains working within sort of a Monero framework? Because they have a completely different sort of set of things.
I have no idea, but the way DriveChain works is also kind of totally different. So we have all this weird stuff that is just kind of kludged into, just kind of weirdly fit into Bitcoin, because it has nothing to do with like they're not even, I think on Sunday you mentioned opcodes, but they're not even opcodes, because none of it was started as opcodes, but then as we were working on it, we figured out that it doesn't make any sense, because nothing is really happening on the transaction level anyway. It's all happening on the block level, so it all ends up in validation.cpp for the block validation. So drive chain is like kind of different from the way Bitcoin and Monero work, so they could probably take. I have no idea what they are planning to do, and that would be really neat. If my guess is that they actually aren't, but I don't know anything about it, so I shouldn't say, but just because there's some Monero.
I was talking to Ricardo, otherwise known as Fluffy Pony, and he's he was mentioning something about maybe adding Mimblewimble like abilities to a side chain of Monero, and I'm not sure if it would be exactly pegged. I don't know. I'm gonna have to ask him again and try to figure
I don't know anything about it, but yeah, it sounds fun.
Yeah. Anyway, I can't believe it, but we've been on for like 75 minutes already. So yeah, so I think we're gonna have to cut it off here. But thank you, 300 plus viewers that have been watching live. Paul, any last words about drive chains and the future of Bitcoin as a result?
Yeah, okay, that's good, because I just thought of something, which is that I don't want, this is just an idea, and what I'm trying to say is that I'm not really trying to present this, because I started off by saying it's like the Nietzschean, like it's the project for everything and nothing. It's big, but I don't know if it's for everything or for nothing yet. It's just an idea, and I think it's a really good idea that's worth your attention and worth really trying. And I'm not trying to say that this is like the big ultimate savior of everything, but I think it has that potential, and I think that you should just kind of give it some of your attention. But I don't want to say that, I'm not like so arrogant that I'm going to say like this is the only thing that you'll ever need. That's the kind of stuff that the Ethereum people say. I hate that. That's stupid. But like this, but yeah, what I'm saying is that I think this is really different, and you're probably going to hear a lot of arguing about this idea, which is great, and that's awesome. But you should go to the drivechain.info, and you should read the FAQ, and you should read about what's going on, because this idea is not, it's not like other ideas. So like regular ideas like check sequence verify or something is just, it's a lot of code and a lot of testing, and then it's like if some number matches some other number, a math equation doesn't work, and then the transaction fails. But this is very different. This is more like inventing Bitcoin for the first time. So I want people to have more of an open mind than they would have before, because the benefits are way bigger, and also the idea is just bigger. So it's not like we're just editing some little transaction so that it can do one or two more little like backflips or something. This is like a big idea, and it's really it's very large and kind of abstract. So I think and the security of this it's more similar to the way Bitcoin works in general, where it's these incentives for miners, and miners are in charge, but I argue that they are in charge in Bitcoin anyway, because they can steal your money by reorging, and they're in charge in the Lightning Network because they can.
Well, they're not so much in charge, but they're bound by sort of the social community around Bitcoin that, in a way that they can't really cheat.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's the wrong way of thinking about it. We have a game theoretic situation in Bitcoin where it's sort of like a Mexican standoff, where these different groups all have some power, but they are checked by some other power, and they are in this kind of equilibrium with each other. And so that is the wrong way to think about it, is that it's very reductionist to say the miners can just steal from the
they can't. They can't.
That's not how anything works. And that's like saying the police can come and just take all of your stuff, which sometimes they do, but that's all other. I don't want to draw the conversation there.
It's under very specific circumstances.
It's a very oversimplified way of looking at the world, and you shouldn't look at the world that way, and you shouldn't look at this project that way. So. And again, I'm not saying that it's perfect. I'm just saying I think it's probably the best sidechain idea, and definitely worth your attention and worth trying. So I'm glad that you asked that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm been excited about this project. I don't think I've hidden that at all, and I would like to see it come to pass. Do go read the BIPs. They're going to be in the show notes, and you can go take a look at all of the stuff that Paul's written. I really do believe that this has the power to potentially change a lot of the way we look at cryptocurrency in general, if it works the way we think it will. And certainly, I mean, we'll learn a lot more about what gives a currency value, because at the very least, it'll answer the question: is a feature enough, or is it something more than that? And yeah, we'll discover some of that. Who knows? Even if it doesn't happen on Bitcoin, I have a feeling somebody will hard fork it and add side chains or something to another Bitcoin hard fork or something. So this is something that I think is coming regardless.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would suck hugely. If that's sort of what it had.
Just so we need more conflicts, right, and more just weird interchange.
Yeah, I don't know. Like this is one of those economic questions that I'm still kind of like questioning. Is that, are conflicts bad for Bitcoin? I'm not sure that the answer is no. So
I think I think it's a nuanced question, but the idea that someone has the option of, with a whole new set of miners, new proof of work, copying the chain history of Bitcoin, and then adding this feature, that is kind of very much an indication that the miners are not in charge, right? Because if and only if it's a good feature. So if it's a good feature versus a bad feature, if it's a good feature, the miners basically have to add it, or they can be like crushed by someone just creating a new spinoff that has a different proof of work. So, but if it's a bad feature, then it's the reverse. Then they must not add it, because
I mean, it's a step beyond UASF. But yeah, I mean, more or less, that's what you're talking about, is that the user.
So this is what I'm saying, is that the relationships are not just like some guys in charge or something.
No, it's definitely not hierarchical. It's more dependent in some sort of circular graph or something.
Yes.
Anyway, thank you, Paul, for this very enlightening conversation. We'll definitely have to do it again. Thank you, audience, for sticking with us for almost an hour and a half. I didn't expect this to go this long. I thought it would be like a 30-40 minute show. It certainly was a lot longer. But anyway, thank you, everyone, and this song is done.